This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
So how do you rebuild a nation after it's been completely, totally shattered? It's not just about raising new armies or writing new laws. Today, we're diving into an incredible story of collapse and rebirth and how one single brilliant change to education literally became the blueprint for the modern state.
Okay, let's set the scene. The year is 1806. Prussia, a major European power, goes up against Napoleon's forces and gets absolutely crushed. We're talking a catastrophic, humiliating defeat. And this wasn't just a lost battle. This was the total, systemic collapse of a state.
And this defeat, well, it ripped the curtain back and showed that something was rotten right at the core of the old Prussian system. It proved that the entire structure of the state was fundamentally broken. This was a true existential crisis.
So what exactly went wrong? Honestly, what didn't go wrong might be a shorter list. The bureaucracy was toothless, society was stuck in this super rigid class system, and maybe most importantly, there was no real sense of a unified people or nation. The state was basically a hollow shell, just waiting to be knocked over. This disaster forced Prussia's leaders to a really radical conclusion. They realized that tinkering with the army or passing a few new laws was like putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. No, the problem was way deeper. The only way forward was to fundamentally remake the people themselves. And just like that, education became the absolute centerpiece of national survival.
So, if you've decided you need to create a whole new kind of person to save your country, who do you call? Well, you call an intellectual, right? Someone who can actually spell out a vision for this new citizen.
And that intellectual was a guy named Johann Gottlieb Fichte. Right in the middle of this crisis, he gets up and delivers a series of public lectures that became super famous, called Addresses to the German Nation. And make no mistake, this wasn't some sleepy academic exercise. This was a fiery, urgent response to a national emergency.
Fichte's core argument was totally revolutionary for the time. He basically stood up and said, look, a real state isn't founded on its military might or its fancy legal code. A real, resilient state is built by actively creating a nation through education. The foundation of a strong state is its people.
And the kind of citizen Fichte was talking about was brand new. He wasn't talking about just creating obedient subjects who follow orders. No, he was talking about shaping individuals who have an internal discipline, a shared national consciousness, people who act for the good of the state because they truly want to, not because some king is forcing them to.
We have to be super clear here. This was not some dusty, abstract philosophical debate. Fichte's lectures were basically a wartime speech, a desperate call to mobilize the entire nation through its classrooms. He gave them the big, powerful vision, but he wasn't the guy who was going to actually build the system.
Nope, that job fell to another man, Wilhelm von Humboldt. He was the pragmatist, the architect, the guy who would take Fichte's grand, stirring vision and figure out how to turn it into a concrete, functioning part of the state. Which, of course, leads to the billion-dollar question, how do you actually do that? How do you take this massive idea of remaking the people and turn it into a real, statewide policy? I mean, it sounds impossibly complex, right?
But this is where the genius comes in. Humboldt's solution was stunningly simple and incredibly focused. He didn't try to reform everything all at once. Instead, he found one single leverage point in the system, one change that he knew would cause a massive ripple effect.
And here it is. This was the masterstroke. Humboldt moved the responsibility for training teachers from the university's theology department over to the philosophy department. Now think about what that means. In the old way, teachers were basically clergy. They were tied to one specific religion, they couldn't really teach the natural sciences, and their job was to create loyal subjects of a particular faith. Humboldt's new system created secular educators who could teach kids from any denomination. They were trained in science, logic, and history. And their ultimate goal? It wasn't to create subjects, it was to create citizens of the state. And that one single bureaucratic change became the engine for building the modern Prussian state. And, believe it or not, a model for nations all over the world.
So you can see this perfect chain of events. First, you have a devastating collapse that reveals a deep weakness. That crisis leads to a powerful new vision. Let's rebuild the nation by educating our citizens. And finally, a very specific, practical reform is put in place to make that vision a reality. Defeat sparked a new idea, and that idea created a whole new system.
The core takeaway from all this is pretty stark. The architects of the new Prussia realized that you simply cannot build a modern nation-state with clergy as your primary school teachers. You need educators who can give everyone a common, secular foundation in reason, science, and a shared national identity. And that's exactly why the Faculty of Philosophy was suddenly elevated to such a central, powerful role in the state.
So in the end, this isn't just a story about a couple of German thinkers. It's really a masterclass in state design. It's the history of a nation pushed right to the brink of extinction that had to redesign its very core simply to survive. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the critical leverage points for change in our own societies today?
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.